Ooh, there we go. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Summit Success Series. Another week. I guess this is our second week doing this show. We're very excited to bring it back, where we talk tactics, strategies, mindsets, experiences, and really anything else it takes to build a successful business. For the rest of August, we are going to be focusing on our talent density pillar in our Summit Business Success Framework. Your most valuable asset in your business will always be the people you have on your team. Making sure you attract, screen, hire, and onboard the right people for your business, and then aligning them with the goals, your strengths, weaknesses, and the culture is extremely important. Now, last week, we had Summit Chaser's very own Joseph Ortiz, our master recruiting specialist, join us. So if you haven't already, go and watch that replay. But after this live show today, because we have another amazing guest today, which I will be introducing here in just a minute. But really quickly, just a quick reminder to save your seat, whether it's virtually or in person, for the Young Professionals Leadership Summit in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. That is October 19th. I almost forgot what date it was. We have set this event up to be inclusive to anyone, no matter where you are in your leadership journey. So go get your tickets, save your spot, and you can do so by going to yplsummit.com. You can go meet the speakers and get your tickets now. There's yplsummit.com. Now, I am very excited to bring on our guest for this week, the host of the No Degree podcast and owner of NoDegree.com recruiting agency, and also has some of the best content that I have seen from recruiters or actually really anybody on LinkedIn, Junaid Iqbal. So thank you very much, my friend. What is going on?
Hey, what's up? So glad to be here. Uh, I'm excited. I'm excited to share like insights that I've learned from recruiting and just love what you've done with the YPL. And if it's in Toronto, I may be able to go because I have a huge
Please.
crew in Toronto. My aunt lives there, so Toronto is an easy place for me because I don't have to pay to stay anywhere. So it's like I may make the trip.
That is always a plus when you have an aunt to stay with. And that would be amazing. You could be there. Absolutely
Yeah.
amazing. And you, I got to give you some props. You were one of the very first podcasts that I was on as a Summit Success when we had Summit Chasers. You were one of the very first podcasts I've ever been on.
Yeah. And look, it's crazy because like I love seeing people like after my podcast because a lot of people will tell me like I'm one of the first podcasts they've been on, and people are always nervous, and it's always cool to see the journey after the podcast because
Mhm.
I'm all about just people growing. And one of the things about my podcast is like I really want to show how people without degrees like look, they value learning, they value leadership, they value growth. It's not like they
Mhm.
don't value education.
I know, and that's what I loved about it, is that different perspective. I was looking on your website earlier, and that seems to be one of the. It's kind of a change in focus with a lot of like really
Yeah.
prevalent companies like Google and Apple and all these types of
Yeah.
companies where they're not just looking at the letters beside your name. They're looking at attributes, experiences. They're looking at different characteristics now. They're overweighing different characteristics now, and
Yep.
it's so cool to see a recruiting agency like yourself really taking that and then teaching companies how to like what to look for outside of just the obvious what's on the resume.
You know, my Toronto friend is actually in the comments right now, Brian Golad. So he's in Toronto. Um, so I always catch up with him, and I actually learned resumes from him. So always, the
Oh,
power of LinkedIn, just networking, just meeting the right people.
happy to have him here. Yeah, absolutely. We'll have to get him to the event too. I love it. Well, let's jump into it, my friend. So one of the things that I loved about, so again, I was looking on your website, and something that really caught my eye that I have been hearing over and over again as I'm talking to our own recruiter that's in our business, and then obviously yourself and a few others, is some of the big mistakes that some businesses and recruiters or hiring managers make. And that is the misleading job postings and job descriptions. And I saw in there, it's a very high number, high percentage of job listings that you see. And I'm bringing this up now because this is obviously perceivably, it's not actually, but perceivably the first step when you're wanting to hire somebody is
Yeah.
putting a good job description out there. So if you could break that down, kind of what do you mean when you say misleading and maybe untrue, some of these job postings that you're seeing, and what are some of the most common maybe misleading characteristics that you've seen?
So oftentimes, what a lot of people do is they'll copy and paste a job description that they had before,
Mm,
or they copy and paste a job description from somewhere else online. And you have to really be intentional about the role.
mm,
You need to sit down with the hiring manager. Recruiters need to go, and hiring managers are always busy. Be like, what are the problems this person is solving? What do you need from them? What would be a good hire? What would be a bad hire? Who excelled in the past? Who did bad in the past? And try to get the why. So now when you come up with a job description, who are they going to be supporting? What are they going to be doing? And giving more insight, because you need to sell through the job description, and one of the ways you sell is by being accurate. Too many times you get these job descriptions that are so vague, and then when people interview, they're like, "Oh, I didn't know that," or like, and they're getting the wrong thing. So that's one thing. The other thing I would say is the qualifications required for it. I see a
mm,
lot of times they'll say, "Oh, we must have this, must have that," and I always say, "Okay, what if someone can do the job but they don't have that?" So they'll say,
mm,
"Hey, must have the PMP." Okay, what if someone can manage a project but they don't have a PMP? Are you going to deny them? Oh, must have a major in this. And then some of the dumbest ones I see, any degree, bachelor's degree in anything. So, first of all, I'm not saying you
mm,
can't have that requirement. Like maybe, hey, you need someone with a specific one, right? Hey, we need someone master's in organizational leadership. Okay, that's very specific. But now when you say bachelor's degree in anything, what does it mean anything? Like, what if they have a one in music, right? What if someone has a comp like that just means you're just saying like, hey, I'm just putting this requirement on and I'm not being specific. So you need to be specific with your requirements.
mm. So let's go back to the beginning of that because that is an amazing concept and subject that we're going to stick on for a second here. So when you said going back to your hiring manager and having that conversation, find out, like being really really clear, and this is something that we over communicate, is being very very clear what we need this role to accomplish, what does it look like, and what were those specifics that they would need to increase the likelihood that they would be successful. What does that conversation look like?
It's a lot of back and forth. It's like, why are you hiring? How quickly do you need to fill the role?
Mhm.
What are you losing out on every month that you don't have someone in this role? What's the damage? Are you losing money? Are you losing time? Are key initiatives not going? And you need to figure out the impact out of that role. And it, like what Brian's saying is like, I say a job description, most job descriptions are wish lists. Like, just
Mhm.
because someone doesn't meet 100%, like, oftentimes when I'm recruiting, sometimes we're like, hey, we need a VP.
Mhm.
And I'll be like, look, what if I get a director that's punching up? Is that
Mhm.
okay? What if I get someone who does? Because I think too many people get so fixed on this one person and just
Mhm.
realize that there's a characteristic. They need to have certain characteristics and be a little flexible, have a range.
Mhm.
Just like, that's like saying, hey, I'm looking for a job. I need to make 122,000. Okay, what if someone says 121? What if someone says 125? Are you going to say no? Same thing. What if someone comes in a little under? What if someone comes a little above? And I think that flexibility has a big impact.
Mhm.
And or else you'll just spend the whole time. Like I've seen some people, they're looking for the perfect person, 6 months no hire. And I'm like,
Mhm.
you know what? You could have groomed someone into the role and made them the perfect person in 6 months, as opposed to just waiting and waiting.
Mhm. So what? So you're going back to those characteristics, not waiting for that perfect, you know, puzzle piece to come fall in your lap, and instead kind of get something that could grow into the role, mold the puzzle piece, and then put it into place.
Yep.
What characteristics? How do you do that? How do you do that when you're not looking for this, and especially for smaller businesses, because every hire is so impactful when a smaller
Yeah.
business. If you have 10 people on your team, you hire one person, you're adding 10%, employee, you're adding 10% of the payroll, right?
Yep.
So when you have to be so careful now. So what do you look for in characteristics in
So
conjunction with what's going to be successful in the role?
so for smaller businesses like a and just like you said, like a Google, if they hire someone who's not passionate, who's not good, Google's still going to be printing money. It's not going to shut down. But for a small business, a bad hire can shut them down, right? That's the
Mm,
difference between them stagnating or them getting maybe 1 to 2x or 30%
mm,
growth year over year. So you really need to find that curiosity. Like, hey,
mm,
is this person curious? Are they learning? Are they inquisitive? The other thing is you need to discover what this person is passionate about and
mm,
figure out how you can make them mold them towards that passion. So let's say you're interviewing for a salesperson, and this salesperson in a few years, right, they want to be leading a sales team. And you know what? They also, let's say they like for example, I'm an assistant wrestling coach. So let's say they also volunteer on the side. So if you tell them, "Hey, look, you know what? Our goal for you is to like document the processes, grow, and if you can bring in more sales, we want to get you a team so you can grow that team, and that's what we want to do for you. And hey, I see that you're an assistant wrestling coach. If you need to leave early on certain days, as long as you get your work done and get your deals, like we're more than happy for you to leave early so you can go, support the team."
mm,
That salesperson is going to be committed because oftentimes you need to find out the passions that people have outside of work. And for
yeah,
small businesses, you can have that flexibility. Like, hey, you know what? You need to pick up your kids like early from work. Hey, you know what? As long get your meetings out the way, if you could do a few, some extra work after, or you could come in earlier. 100%. So you need to find because people, if you're flexible with people, people will be flexible for you. Some people are, hey, these are my work hours. Some people are more flexible. For example, like I actually have a job interview tonight, and it's at 11 p.m. because the guy's in India. So I told him, I was like, look, I know the team's in India. I'm very flexible. I'd rather interview at 11 p.m. at night as opposed to 8 a.m. So find out what they truly care about, find out their goals. And I think more and more for small businesses, if you tell them, hey, I see that you have a side hustle, just realize we're perfectly fine with it. Like, as long as you don't interfere with work, if you need to take a small meeting here and there, as long as it's impacting, we'll support that.
mm,
Now you have someone who has a little business. They'll be like, hey, you know what? I really like. I'm not gonna get that from somewhere else. And it's like
mm.
you truly care about that person. Because if you want someone to care about your business, you need to care about them, and you should support them. And once you do that, you'll get the same back.
That was so powerful what you just said. If you care about them, they'll care more about the business, right? And if you can get them aligned with the culture, mission, and value of the company right away, you're gonna have a strong employee for a very long time. Now, and I like what Adrena said here. Hire someone who's curious and hungry, and that's obviously something that you said as well. Are there attributes that are outweighed or are more commonly very important when it comes to hiring for almost any role? Like I'm assuming curiosity would be one of them, but are
Yeah,
there any other attributes that you see that people can kind of look for that would increase the likelihood of them being a good fit or somebody who could work out long term?
I find for me, and let's focus on the small businesses and startups. I find flexibility is key. Because with a startup, like you're gonna pivot. Like, hey, you know what? We got something new. It's working better. We may have to shift our strategy, and you need someone who's willing for that. Whereas some people for big companies is like, look, I know I'm gonna deal what my week is gonna look like. I know what my quarters are gonna look like.
Mm,
Some little variance. Whereas a startup is like, hey, look, your role may mold 6 to 8 months from now, depending on
mm,
that. So I think that's important and resilience, right? Like small businesses
yeah,
deal with things like when things go tough, they may like you need someone who's going to be able to handle the swings, right? Handle the highs, handle the lows. And it's like, hey, when things aren't as good for the business, can they mentally perform? Can they do the best? And just like that transparency. So I think those are things that go big for the startups and small businesses.
Yeah, and that's a really good point too, because there's and even some of the businesses that we've worked with, their hires in the past, or if they're hiring, like a marketing position, a CMO, or even somebody in sales, and they go for somebody that has really attractive, at least on paper, experience, but those experiences in like the Googles or the Hewlett
Yep.
Packards or those bigger companies, and they come into a very, pivoting often, almost every week. Sometimes it
Yeah.
feels like small business. They that's not a smart hire because they don't know how to pivot, right? The work comes to them. They don't go after things, right? So it's very different. So in that way, that's where, not just looking at the letters beside the name, because you get somebody fresh out of college and then now they're going into a small business where things change all the time. There's not a curriculum that they follow, right? They have to
Yep.
think for themselves and that kind of stuff. So that's where those attributes that you specifically are very keen on finding are extremely important. Now, where if somebody, you're a small business, or even if you're an SME, you're a bigger business too, and you need to hire for somebody who's in these types of roles, what other and maybe you've tried, you're putting the postings out there and
Yeah.
you're just not getting the talent, right? You need to go
Yeah.
from being somebody who's drawing people in to going and being the hunter, right? You need to be a recruiter. Where do you start?
So I like LinkedIn Recruiter, right? Like LinkedIn, honestly, with sales now, you start really looking at that. But I like looking at talent networks.
Okay.
So go for people that you know who work in the industry and just be like, hey, do you have any friends that are looking for something? Uh, I find that works well. So there are a lot of leadership groups like outside where people are upskilling because you get solid talent. You find the community leader. Like
Mhm.
I get people where it's like, I don't know, professionals, project managers in Toronto, and you go in, you ask the leader, be like, hey, I'm looking to hire for this role. Do you know anyone in your group? Like who stands out? Because those people know who are active community members who are there participating and upskilling, and those are a lot of great characteristics because people who are very community oriented, where they support groups and like that, they're also very business oriented because they see the business as a part of their community.
That's great advice. Now, a lot of those people, well, maybe over 50% of them,
Yeah.
are currently employed. What's your opinion on going after currently employed, we'll say like snagging talent from other companies? What's your opinion on that? And then how would you go about doing it?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's nothing wrong with it because at the end of the day, like if they're happy at their job, they're not going to leave.
Mhm.
And the fact is that that is a viable way. That's how most recruiters work, right? They
Mhm.
focus on people who are employed. I tell people don't ignore people who are not employed, right? And I
Mhm.
think there are some strategic ways that you can test them out. I would say try to find someone who has done the work that you do. You may want to consider staying in the same industry, but I also tell people be open to people in other industries
Yeah.
because sometimes you'll get people like, hey, I want to leave my industry. Like, yeah, I'd love to kind of work on that and get
Mhm.
that motivation. So I always say, like, you're going to approach different people differently. Like, try some people in the same industry, try some people in a different industry, try some people who are not employed. So that way you get a diverse talent pool because you never know. I've seen some great people who are unemployed, right? You caught
Mhm.
them at the right time and they're perfect talent. And then sometimes if you're not sure if someone's going to work out, if someone's unemployed, just be like, hey, you know what? Would you do a contract? Let's do a contract 1 to 2 months.
Mhm.
Like, hey, worst case scenario, you're maybe out for a little money, but you get to test them out and
Yeah.
do a trial period.
No, I like that. And there's a lot, I mean, especially if you're, a small business, especially in certain industries, like you're in the construction industry and you just started your business, maybe you're in year five, chances are you've known everybody who works for you since you were a kid,
Yeah.
right? So now hiring other people is scary, let alone hiring somebody in a different industry. Like if
Yep.
you're selling siding or roofing or something like that, or even if you're in SaaS and you're selling a certain type of software, going out and finding talent that doesn't directly work with, especially if you're selling, you need to be
Yeah.
knowledgeable for sales individuals. Going outside of that industry is kind of scary. So what advice or what kind of things can you look for outside of I have experience in this specific industry
Yeah.
to increase the chances that this person will be successful coming into a different industry?
So this is not what you look for. This is create you have to also create good training programs and processes. Like I tell companies, you want to make it so that someone with the minimum experience and foundational skills can go through this training program and still be good. Because oftentimes, if you're relying on someone, hey, I need someone to sell this niche product,
Mhm.
okay, and sometimes that pool can be very small in your local area. So how do you go outside? You can train. Hey, I know someone who sold XYZ. Hey, I know someone who sold this. Hey, they're at least in a similar space. So too many times people don't think about that. And I think like if you're dependent on people being unicorns, you're poised to fail. Because then you're dependent on finding unicorns, you're dependent on keeping those unicorns
There you go.
happy.
Yeah.
But if you have a good process, you can take someone with limited skills and do well as
Mhm.
long as they have a certain good attitude. So I think too many times companies got to look internal and it's like, look, okay, we have a sales professional. They already know how to sell. We're going to go give the nuances and intricacies of our customers in the industry. Now they need to adjust it. Um, because think about it, like you've seen roofing sales, right?
Mhm.
I knew I had a guy on my podcast who also did roofing sales. He said he would hire people from the gym, like
Mhm.
personal trainers. He was like, these guys, they're like, look, they have limited earning potential compared to the roofing industry, right? Like you can make good money, but it's like there's only so much you can do because you're selling and working with them. But he's like, we used to double them and they made great salespeople. So it's about finding those things. And I know certain companies, what they do is they take salespeople. There's a financial company I know, and Yelp is known to be like a tough place to work at. A lot of people don't like it. So that financial company recruits from Yelp because they know, hey, they know how to sell. They hate selling their product. It's an easy transition. So find those things, right? Find those competitors, and I find that find those bad companies because so many people want to leave, but they're
Mhm.
good workers.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or you look for one of the tricks I was hiring for a marketing director is you look for like marketing coordinators that maybe
Yeah.
didn't quite make the cut to get get promoted or something like that. They're great. They're great at
Yeah.
what they do, right? And maybe this other person just sneaked them out, or they politically worked their way up a little bit
Yep.
better, whatever it is. There's lots of those little intricacies you can look for. And I love what you just said because you are like I needed somebody else to say it because I say it until my face
Yeah.
turns blue. Is that you have to have those onboarding processes
Yep.
and training set up right accordingly to make because if you don't you're pigeonholing yourself to your point to it have to be okay. I'm in SaaS sales for cloud security software or something like that, whatever, right? So now I'm pigeonholing myself. If I don't have those good processes, I need to find that unicorn, like you said, that's done this specifically before so they can come in and hit the ground running, right? Because and I don't know if it's too lazy or just their priorities aren't there, whatever. I'm not going to call anybody out directly, which I
Yeah.
appreciate you calling out Yelp, but that's so key is having proper onboarding processes and training.
Yeah. So that's again, it's like startup processes. Like,
Hmm.
look, Google can get their unicorns, right? They can afford to pay. When you're a small business, you don't have the same flexibility, you don't have the same budget. So it's like you need to groom. And I think so many times, like, we've been able to groom some employees. Like, we've had some workers who, like, I had one worker who, like, didn't even truly use a computer all their life. And they learned their phone and they ended up being a lead tech support. Why? Because they were curious, they were willing to learn, and we gave them opportunity to grow. So I think it's important to have those growth opportunities.
Yeah. Well, and that's the key in finding those highest value attributes outside of, the letters or these specific experiences, the curiosity, the willingness to learn, the open-mindedness. And there's, the amazing book, I'm sure a lot of people have read it, Principles by Ray Dalio. He is
Yep.
adamant about being radically open-minded. If you can find somebody like that who comes in, as long as they have, like you said, they can sell, it's a lot easier to tell or to teach somebody about a specific product than it is to teach somebody, the intricacies and the attributes that they need to sell.
Yep.
Much
Yep.
more difficult.
And look, good salespeople, they adapt with the times, right? Good
Mhm.
salespeople like, hey, look, I understand the customers. For example, I have someone who sells to dispensaries, and his process is like, yo, I gotta call them because they're in the store. These
Mhm.
people are not store owners, are not checking their email. I gotta call them, right? And
Mhm.
some other people like, yo, you're never gonna catch them on the phone. You gotta catch them on email. Some other people you gotta catch them on LinkedIn. Some other people you gotta
Mhm.
catch them in leadership conferences. There's many ways to sell, and good salespeople know like, hey, I have to adjust my approach based on
Mhm.
my customer because at the end of the day, it's the customer profile that determines everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's one question I want to, or one topic I want to get into. We have a few questions in the comments I want to get to, but first, if you're obviously, and then you're going back to you're a small business owner, you're already so busy with many other things, especially if you're somebody who's so product focused. You have a love affair with your product, so you can't focus on a lot of these other things, which includes recruiting top talent, which obviously, like we said, is so important. So you need to know you're going to a recruiting agency. what are some top, your top three most important things to look for when working with a recruiting agency other than their name being the nodegree.com?
Yeah. So what you would say is, are they generally going to sit down or are they going to assume? So one thing that I tell people is I don't know anything about hiring for your company. I've hired for companies before, but I don't know how it is to hire for your company. And they have to really sit down and get a deep dive of like, why do you need this role? What's this about? What's a good candidate? What's a bad candidate? And I have that. One thing that I'll say is make sure they have expertise in your industry, right? Like healthcare nurses is totally different. I know someone
Mhm.
who's recruiting for a psychometrist. I didn't even know what that was. It's like this specific thing, a psychometrist. So it's like, if someone says, Janai, can you recruit for a psychometrist? I'm like, yo, like, I don't think so. I don't know where they hang out because like some people, they're not on LinkedIn like that. Like people in healthcare are not on LinkedIn. People in
Mhm.
construction, not on LinkedIn. Like my friend was recruiting for like construction project managers and painters. It's like, you're not going to recruit them as a senior software or back-end engineer or a
Mhm.
data engineer. So you have to make sure they understand your industry, they've worked with companies like that, but also that they're willing to learn and ask questions and apply that nuance and customization. That you don't want these cookie cutter approaches because you don't want cookie cutter candidates. You want someone who's
Mhm.
sitting down. Uh, the other thing that I would say is they have different models. A lot of them tend to work on fee, where it's like, hey,
Yeah.
we'll pay a percentage once we get the role, and then make sure you have some sort of like guarantee. Like for us, what we do is we don't give money back. What we do is if they don't stay, we give a replacement fee. I mean,
Mhm.
replacement candidate. So hey, if they don't stay within the term, we'll find another candidate free of charge. So you want to make sure you have some of these things to protect yourself and all that. Because what if they tell their friend, hey, make sure you stay for 1 week so I get my fee and then leave. You don't want that to happen. So you have
Yeah.
to really build that trust and then ask for testimonials. Maybe you can ask to see get referrals, and I think also go build peers in your industry and be like, hey, who's helped you hire?
Mhm.
Like, how'd you go about it? And oftentimes they're more than happy to give you a referral.
Mhm. Well, those are great points, and those are really in line with what I look for too. Is do they take the time to do like a very proper, almost annoyingly,
Yeah.
precise discovery beforehand? Because that just shows that they're not assuming that they know the industry, even if they've hired in it before, or similar companies or whatever it is. They're not assuming because every business is different, the culture is different, the people are
Yep.
different, the outcome that we need to create with these new hires is different. And if they take the time, like I said, if they start to annoy me with how like precise they're
Yes.
being and how many questions, I'm like, this is annoying, but I like this. This is good because you want to be sure, right? Because if they're going to be
Yep.
sending you people, and then the other thing is too is if I get on that first interview and they like it feels like they already know the business. They feels like they've done their homework. They understand what at least the basics of what we told the recruiting company. They know the basics of what the role is going to entail and the outcome that they need to create for it. Like it's very clear that they had a good conversation with them beforehand. I'm like, okay, they
Yeah.
screened this individual, right?
Yep.
And obviously it's going to depend on roles, and I know that every recruiting agency will do it the same, but for me those are the ones that I've had the most success with and built the
Yeah.
best relationships with.
Definitely. And then also, I would say good ones set boundaries. Like,
Mhm.
here's the thing: when I go in, there are some people I don't work with because I'm like, look, you want a unicorn and you don't want to pay.
Yeah.
Like, I just can't. I'm not gonna find a senior data engineer for 50K. I was like, in the
Mhm.
U.S., like it's just not happening. Or they'll be like, hey, we need 5 days a week on site, and your pay's not there. So you have to look at the market and what people are willing to endure. Because I've had instances, and I had to drop clients. Like I got someone who's like, yo, I need someone. I don't care about the degree. Probably someone earlier in their career. They can't have a Yahoo email because that means they're not smart. He just kept on, oh, they should have this certification. They should have this. They should have that. They should be tech savvy. They should be willing to put extra. And then he was like, oh, $17 to $19 an hour. It was just like, I
Crazy.
can't do that. Like, I'm
Mhm.
not like, I gotta get someone so desperate so early in their career, and you gotta get it. And I'm like, yo, that's not gonna happen. And
Mhm.
then I've had other instances where I've had people. I'm like, they found someone local candidate willing to come in office when it was more remote, and he was like, I want 80K. I was like, yo, can you guys do 80K? Kind of agreed. They go, they love him. They're like, this is perfect. They're like, we Junaid, we can't lose him. They offer him 66K. And I'm like, why? Like,
What are you doing?
you can't do these bait and switches and all that stuff. Like, just be transparent. And for me, it's like, if a recruiting company is willing to walk away, look, obviously you're gonna have you need to have some demands too, but
Mhm.
you got to also realize that good recruiters will have that thing because they don't want to waste time. Because so many times people are like, hey, I want to hire you, send them, and they're like, nah, this one's not good. I need someone else. I need someone else. I need someone else. And it's just like you're wasting my time. And I find that there should be a mutual respect. But like, hey, I understand your business. You have your boundaries. I have mine. But good recruiting companies will, put those things in place because they're not there to waste time. They're there to fill someone. They're there to fill the role as quickly as possible because the quicker we fill the role, the faster we make money. And then
Mhm.
we want to make sure that person stays in the role too because
Yeah.
you're not going to use us if the person doesn't stay or if the person's bad.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, that's a really good point. It's not just about how the recruiting company or agency is working with you, it's how you're working with them.
Yep.
And are you being fair to the candidates? Because how they treat the candidate, how the business treats the candidates is also a reflection on you, unfortunately, but it is, right? And those
Yeah.
are still bad reviews. Word of mouth is still very important, if not more important these days. So it's trust and that kind of stuff. So that really, really good points, man.
Yeah.
Really, really good points. Well, we had a question in here, and I feel like this is a question for you. It's from Margaret. Is there a set of criterion that to keep in mind as a junior engineer applying for a startup position?
So again, curiosity, passion, and initiative. That for a startup, you need to be the person that looks at it and is like, hey, I saw this other thing. I'm just gonna take initiative on it and fix it. I'm gonna go ask these customer support questions. I'm gonna go do that extra research. So what I would say is for if you're applying for startup positions, reach out for the founder. If they're small, under 50, you can reach out to the founder. Once they get to 50 to 100, you may reach out to like a CTO or something like that and just be like, hey, I really like your company. Here's my portfolio of projects. I really like your mission. Make sure you know their mission. Like their mission is super important, what they're trying to do, and then ask for a call. Like do that outreach because people will hit me up and I'll get people asking me like, hey, I'm a back end engineer, blah, blah. I'm looking for roles. Whereas like someone comes to me is like, hey, I don't have a degree and I love your mission. I'd love to work for you. Or if someone's like, hey, I have a degree, but I absolutely love your mission. Like I have friends and family. Like my cousin doesn't have a degree and they're very smart. I'd love to kind of work. I'll take that conversation. But you have to show that you care about their mission. Because why do people do startups? Yes, it's to make money, but they have a mission, right? They have something
Mhm.
that they're trying to achieve. There's a problem in the market that they're trying to solve. Show that you care about them solving that problem. And most of the time, you'll at least get a call, at least get
Mhm.
a conversation.
Mhm. These are all amazing points. I feel like we could talk forever, but then everybody's attention span is, I think, 32 minutes these days. That's about
Yeah.
it. But if anybody else, while we're wrapping up, if you have any other questions, drop them in the comments. I really appreciate all the engagement today. But man, do you have anything that you want to say that maybe we didn't cover? Maybe there were some gaps in some of the conversations we had. Is there anything else that you want to bring up?
Yeah, so one thing I'll say is look, we're just scratching the surface and we're going over the principles and the foundations. Just realize there's a lot of nuance and it's easier said than done, right? It may sound simple. Just because something sounds simple does not mean it's easy, right? It's simple to be an Olympian, right? You go to practice, you do it all the time. It's really freaking hard and, like it's not easy at all. So I would say like, and also don't require someone to be an Olympian for your startup. If you only need Olympians, right, you're gonna for a deep limited pool that you probably can't afford. So
Mhm.
just realize that have that flexibility, have that, be transparent, uh, and always network. I think to avoid using a recruiter, the way you avoid using a recruiter is you have to network
Mhm.
constantly because like for my business, like I'm networking with people. I already know people who I would approach to hire well before I'm ever in a position to hire because
Mhm.
I'm always watching people. I'm always doing things because look, when you're using a recruiting agency, right? Look, some hires are good, some hires are bad. That's just the nature. Like I try my best to make filter that, but you just don't ever know. But if you've watched someone for years, you watch how they operate, you watch how they treat people, you've watched how they do projects, then you know like, hey, I'm like I can be like, hey, Zach's gonna be a good hire, or I can be like, yo, Zach, do you know anybody who's looking for this role? I can
Mhm.
trust your recommendation because if you're sending someone to me, I know that you vouch for them in a certain way, or you'll at least let me know, like, hey, I really know him. I could vouch for him, or be like, hey, I he seems like a good guy. I know him a little. I can't, like they'll. I can ask you like, how well would you vouch for him? And depending on that, it's gonna change how I approach the interview
Mhm.
and how much I trust that person off the bat.
No, you said something super important there, is to build this network and build these relationships far before you need a hire, right?
Yeah.
Because if you start focusing on it, okay, I need like an EA, or I need a sales rep. I need somebody to take over this for me because my head's going to blow off, if I keep running my business like this. If you get to that point and you don't have at least a bench or a network that you can reach out to, with credibility and trust and that kind of stuff, you're gonna run into, the warm body syndrome, where I just need somebody in here, right?
Yeah.
And then you don't have the onboarding set up, you don't have the trainings written out because you're so scrambled.
Yeah.
Right? Set this up beforehand. If you have a business and you know that you want to grow, that's the type of business that you want. These again, people, it's so important. It's the most important asset, most valuable asset in your business is the people. So have these processes and think of this ahead of time, have it planned out ahead of time, and build that network. I totally agree with you. Your network is probably one of your most powerful assets as you grow. And even if you don't want to grow your business, your network is still
Yeah.
extremely important, right? We're community orientated beings, right? Like your network is extremely valuable.
Yeah. The other thing I would say, I totally forgot to mention this, is that one of some of the best hires I have are people who have done part-time stuff for me, and then I've given them more hours as the business grew. So just realize that sometimes you get some people part-time and they grow with the business, and because they deliver so much value, they help the business generate revenue, and that revenue can be used to pay them to deliver even more value. So don't sleep on hiring some people for like, hey, I just need you an hour or 2 hours a day, and you learn about them, you learn about their drive, you learn about their initiative. This is like an extended interview,
Yeah.
but you actually see what they're doing. And I've like my team, it's just like they started small, and I've given them more hours as they've proven themselves, just because they grew with the company.
Mhm. No, and that's so important. There's not, I mean, that's just an iterative to what you're saying before. It's not only going to be one way. Every hire is not going to come in the same way. Not every hiring process is going to look the same. Not every unicorn is going to come in the same way. And it's important to test your processes like you would, your sales playbook,
Yep.
right? What are some of my interviews? I'm going to adjust my interviews so that I'm the more likely to, because when you're dealing with people, nothing's ever absolute, but I'm going to increase the odds that I get a good hire in the end by adjusting how I'm screening them, adjusting my interviewing process, and adjusting what I'm looking at in resumes and that kind of stuff. Like you said before, it's simple, it's not easy, and it takes a lot of iterative steps, right, to find the one that works for you. And obviously working with recruiters, especially early on, is great, especially ones that are willing to work with you, because you can learn so much from them, like what to
Yeah.
look for in candidates. Because you can ask them, like, I would have, looking on this person's resume, I never would have, like, I would have swiped right or I've never used those apps in a long
Yeah.
time, but whatever it says no, whatever direction is no on those dating apps, I would have swiped left on them. I wouldn't even look. So what did you see that would have told you that they would have been a good
Yeah.
fit, right? And ask those questions and build those into your systems.
No, definitely. It's like those types of things. But yeah, no, this was fun. I'm glad you're doing this. You're sharing info, and yeah, I hope. Yeah, let me know. Send me the details of that. Like, if I could make that trip happen.
Yeah, let's
Toronto
do
is
it.
a nice city, and I always love meeting podcast guests in person.
I love it. Yes. So reminder, he's reminding everybody for the YPL Summit, or sorry, the Young Professionals Leadership Summit in Toronto, Ontario, October 19th. And you can get your tickets virtually or in person. Obviously, in person is always so much better because you can interact. We have panel. We have amazing panelists that are going to be there. We're going to be doing workshops. We're going to be very interactive. We're going to be challenging you that are in the audience. And obviously, if you get your tickets for the virtual, it'd be good if you can't get there, but if you can, try to get there in person. Like Junaid's going to try to get there in person. But thank you so much for being here, my friend. This is an amazing conversation, and I can't wait to have more of them with you. Where can anybody find you if they want to, get more information, or maybe they want to hire you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is the easiest way. So Junaid, you're gonna catch it in the whatever my comments and all that. Jonaed. Check out the No Degree podcast. I interview people without college degrees, have them share their stories. I had a great episode with Zach. I have over 200 episodes, and from LinkedIn you'll find me elsewhere. Or you could email me Junaid@nodegree.com. And if you're looking to hire for anything, you're looking to hire talent, and you want someone who really spends the time, my team and I do a great job at that.
Beautiful. Awesome, everybody. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for everybody being here in the comments and being engaged. You can catch us on Saturday morning for the Summit Coffee Club, where we have a little bit more relaxed conversation where founders get together, de-stress, talk about challenges, talk about wins, and understand that you're not alone. Even though sometimes you feel like it when you're an entrepreneur and you're fighting through the stages of growing your business and just finding that success. That's where we hang out on Saturday mornings, 11 a.m. Eastern or 9 a.m. Mountain Pacific time, but Mountain Standard Time, Mountain Pacific time, Mountain Standard Time. But everybody, thank you again. And until next time, keep chasing your next summit.